the CGA Tour, a podcast unlike any other. Now your host, Calvin Alexander.
Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. As always, here I'm your host, Calvin Glen Alexander, and on tonight's episode of the podcast, I'm joined by the writer for GoPokes.com, McClain Baxley, Definitely messed it up on the first take. But McClain, thanks so much for joining the episode here, and glad to have you on. Thanks for joining the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Been a fan of your work and excited to be here.
Well, thank you. I'm, of course, a big fan of your work and everything you're covering for Oklahoma State. The main thing I'm always hearing from fellow Oklahoma State fans and other things is not an optimistic approach to this offseason when it comes to football. And sometimes a little bit not optimistic when it comes to basketball, just because we didn't make the tournament last year. But I think that's a little bit more optimism. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about some recent articles that you've written here, on 247 Sports, and kind of go over those a little bit of why Oklahoma State fans should be optimistic heading into the offseason with a very, I would say, uncertain quarterback situation. But 2 years ago was pretty darn uncertain because we started three quarterbacks for a little bit. But this one seems like a different quarterback situation that's more uncertain, and Gundy coming off of his worst record at OSU. So I don't know if you just want to jump into it there and tell Oklahoma State fans kind of, well, what are your three things you're thinking about, or multiple things to think about of why Oklahoma State fans should be optimistic here heading into fall?
Well, I think the one thing to be optimistic is it can't be worse, right? I mean, 3-9, it's hard to, I guess, you could go 0-12 or 2-10 or what have you, but I just don't think it can be worse than what it was last year. What we saw on the field, defensively, especially, they were the second worst defense in the country, really bad defense across the board. And that did not help when, Colin Oliver went down against Arkansas. So across the board, the defense has to be better than it was last year. And then offensively, with so many new players, they're only returning one starter from last year in tight end Josh Ford. It's a lot of uncertainty, like you said, at quarterback. It's a lot of uncertainty on the offensive line. They have to fully replace. You don't have Brendan Presley. There's no Ollie Gordon anymore. Totally new receivers room, which, and I, being an optimist, not just when it comes to Oklahoma State or just when it comes to sports, but I think that's a good thing. You saw the flaws of last year on both sides of the ball that really held them back and, led to an 0-9 record in conference play. Now, opposing coaches, opposing coordinators don't really know what to expect. We don't know, Todd Grantham hasn't been the coordinator for defense in a couple of years, never been the defensive coordinator under Mike Gundy. We haven't seen Doug Meacham in action in a couple of years, leading an offense. So what the product will look like is a lot of unknowns. I think a lot of things will be exposed there at Oregon, but then especially Big 12 play when that begins against Baylor, at week 4. So I think the biggest reason for optimism right now is we don't know what to expect, which I'm taking as a good thing, and it can't be worse than it was last year.
Well, on that note of why couldn't be worse, what are some of the strengths this team has coming into the fall this year? Because we know quarterback's not a strength, but we don't know a bunch more. What do we know, or what do we think will be a strength?
I'm kind of high on their linebacker, middle of the defense area. Obviously, losing Nick Martin, losing Colin Oliver to the draft. Those are two guys, two All-American guys, two All-American caliber talents. But they replace them with guys like, Brian McCoy, Brandon Rawls, Trip White, Malik Charles. He's kind of linebacker, outside linebacker, edge rushers. We saw a little bit in the spring game that they are going to rotate off, and they're going to be kind of that rover. They're not relying on just two guys, which is what Brian Yarda did the past couple of years. Relying so much on Nick Martin and Colin Oliver that when they went down, the backups just could not ping. They couldn't compete at that level. Whereas now when you're rotating 3, 4, 5 guys, veteran guys that have played a lot of college football, whether at Power 5 level or Group 5 level or Division 2 ranks, they've seen a lot of football, seen a lot of college football, and so having that experience is going to be good. And then you've got younger guys behind them, Tamarick Johnson, Gunnar Wilson, and Powasa Utu, 3 guys that haven't really played. 2 of them really haven't played. They're redshirt freshmen this season. I really like that room. I think, and especially with so much uncertainty on it across the board, especially in the secondary, which has been a big question mark and weakness the past couple of years. I think having a good linebacker core that can get the quarterback and can also just lead that defense is something that I'm interested to see how it actually plays out, when it comes time to actually play the game. But that's I think one of the biggest strengths, coming out of spring ball, coming out of spring game, and what I've heard, talking to players and coaches over the past couple of months, is that linebacker I feel pretty confident about.
Yeah, it seems like there's just a different energy, at least on social media, from all the football team stuff. Granted, I'm not part of the team or anything like that whatsoever, but I can just see and read kind of through social media that, hey, it seems like there's just guys who are just all over social media, but including a future Oklahoma State player who's not on the roster this year in Caden Batman Jones, who's trying to recruit for 2026 and some other classes ahead of us here. Do you think that Gundy kind of went back to the drawing board, or kind of Oklahoma State personnel as a whole, and said, hey, we got to redo how we're recruiting here and there, and they noticed some issues? Because if so, I think that's only a good thing, right?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing. And I think there's several factors. Yeah, you mentioned Katie Jones, the running back there at Jenks, 4-star talent. They've got, Jason Bradford, a cornerback, also a 4-star from IMG. They've definitely improved their recruiting this offseason. I think there's, a couple of factors that have led to that. One of them, Gundy was almost fired after a 3-9 season. I think that's clear. And so he's definitely on the hot seat. And so, this season, this 2025 season, and this, recruiting class is going to be very huge for him. They're also utilizing NIL for the first time. Last year they used it as a retention tool, keeping guys like Ollie Gordon and the offensive line and, a couple of the defender guys from transferring out. They used them to keep them back rather than using it as a recruiting tool. Like a lot of teams have used it to go out and get the, 4 or 5-star receiver, or go get the big time quarterback. They've used that as a thing to get kids to Stillwater, to get them to Oklahoma State. And then this coaching staff is just not scared. I mean, Gundy said that after the spring game, that these guys just, they won't back down. You got Todd Grantham, Cooper Bassett, Jules Montanar, Corey Patterson, all these new coaches on both sides of the ball that, have coached and been around, the biggest programs in the NCC and the Big Ten, that have gone up against, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, and know how to recruit against those schools. He's not doing that at Oklahoma State, with that NIL budget, with that, we're going to be good. We're going to, in Big 12, which is continuously wide open and will always be wide open, as the way I see it. I mean, nobody knows really who's going to win the conference, and it's been that way for the past couple of years. Even when Texas and Oklahoma were still in the Big 12. So using all those selling points has definitely been a huge weapon and a huge, benefit for this team that's coming off their worst season in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, that all sounds awesome. There's just a bunch of new energy and stuff like that. But one of the other reasons that I love doing the podcast here, but having different people on week to week, is that you're not kind of fortunately, you're not like an Oklahoma State lifer. I was born and bred Oklahoma State guy. There was no other school I was going to. Whereas you're coming in from an outside perspective here a little bit. What catches you like differently when you first got to Stillwater, or when you first started covering the team here, as like, hey, you know what, this is kind of interesting? And has some things changed over time that you've noticed that maybe someone like me, who, I started college in 2012, right? So I've been around Oklahoma State for a while and was going to Oklahoma State games when I was younger, where I may have just completely missed it at this point.
I think one of the biggest things, moving from Georgia, where I lived, the first 23 years of my life, come out here to Oklahoma State, was the passion that this fan base has for its programs. I mean, whether that's, obviously, I think, from an outside perspective, you'll see, support and pride in the football team. You'll see it in men's basketball, maybe, women's basketball. But I think from the top down, from football all the way down to, women's tennis to, men's and women's golf. I mean, there's just so much pride for their programs. And you see that, on game days when you're walking around at Boone Pickens or in Gallagher, Iowa. But you also see it, at restaurants. You'll see it at, coffee shops. I mean, this is a fan base that, though I think there's an understanding that they're not the best, especially we're talking specifically football. They understand that they're not the number one team in the country. They understand that they, I think last year might have been a difference, because I think there was expectation to make the playoff last year, but they're not a perennial power. But I think they still appreciate and understand that they, are a brand, a nationally known brand, and there's a lot of pride for them. So that's something that's definitely stuck, and it's. But I've seen even more so in the 2 years I've been here. So that's something that is really cool to see. Again, even last year, 3-9 season, there was still a good amount of fans out there at in Boulder for the season finale of this team that came in 3-8, 0-8 in conference play, going to play a top 25 Colorado team, halfway across the country, and there was still a ton of orange in the stands on senior day in a game that I think they all forgot about. I think that's a game that OSU fans will not look back positively on, I don't believe, but yeah, just the passion that the fan base has for their Cowboys and Cowgirls is really cool to see it close.
Yeah, you bring it up. I think the Milwaukee Smith start into time at Oklahoma State will not be remembered much at all, honestly. I think that'll be mostly forgotten. Unfortunate for him, because I'm sure he was doing his best out there as a redshirt freshman, but a 52-0 loss to a Colorado team just it is not sticking in my brain, hopefully longer than it should.
I think it shows how bad Texas Tech's defense was, because the week before, Milwaukee got his first start against the Red Raiders, and that was a back and forth classic, Big 12, 1,000-point game. And then maybe it's the first game, it was a senior day hype for him and the rest of the offense. But yeah, just to go out there and pretty much from the get go, that game, I was able to kind of write my story at halftime, my game coverage there, just because it did not look like it was going to be looking up in the second half there.
Yeah, that was one of those where early on in the season, it's like, hey, you know what? I'd love to go check out Boulder, see Oklahoma State play the Big 12 team that's back in the Big 12 now, and cap off a triumphant season here, hopefully head into the Big 12 championship game back-to-back years. And unfortunately, it was the opposite story. Could not have been more different.
Yeah, I think that was a game, like you said, preseason, it would have been, Ollie Gordon, Brendan Presley's, last regular season game, on the, a game that could decide if they get Dallas or not. And instead we're asking questions about the future, about the, coaching changes or anything. So yeah, definitely the last season's the one that's memorable for some reasons, but not the reasons that I think a lot of Poke fans would hope for sure.
Yeah, well, you mentioned earlier the NIL stuff, how it's changing the philosophy at Oklahoma State from being retaining guys. Of course, there were a lot of guys to retain on the roster there before, whereas now it's kind of switching because there's just not that many. I mean, a lot of guys graduated, 4 guys were drafted. I think another 4 guys signed kind of practice squad roster agreements or other agreements, kind of undrafted free agent stuff, NFL teams. So there's not as many guys to bring back. But what do you think is good about the NIL philosophy for Oklahoma State changing here? Retaining versus actually going out and using this recruiting tool?
I think it's a good thing using it as a recruiting tool, and I think that's what a lot of programs are doing. That it's a way to get players that might not otherwise have thought about OSU, might not have thought about Stillwater, Oklahoma. They don't have the biggest budget in the world. I don't have the exact figures of what they're kind of working with on different players, on different calibers, or if some of these recruits are even getting paid at all. But I think for the most part, using it to just kind of level the playing field. Now they're on the level with a lot of their Big 12 opponents. Again, I think there's still room to grow to compete with the Ohio States, Georgias, Texases. But I think to get on a more level playing field with some of their guys that they've been losing recruits to over the past couple of years, I think it puts them back in the field to be on a more level playing field with some of those guys that in recent years they hadn't been working. I think Kenyatta Wright is one of the biggest players that has really shaped what this program looks like now. He was hired last summer as the new director of football business for Oklahoma State. Former player, but coming back and just kind of reshaping, and I think he's been huge in helping build this coaching staff, helping build this roster. From both for last year and more early this year, getting guys on campus, getting them deals, getting them, and just kind of cooperating with agents and nationally. I think he's been a huge asset for Mike Gundy and this program, the football program, and Oklahoma State athletics as a whole, because the football program is the lifeblood for a lot of these programs, and so if they can get this, on paper, they've made a lot of the right moves. Now we just have to wait until August to see if those moves actually work, on the field. But on paper and from my point of view, it's been a really nice off season for them. as far as, going from a 3-9 team to a roster that looks, pretty competitive right now.
Yeah, well, in the last podcast I just did, it was like a week-by-week prediction of how I think the schedule's going to go out. And I was saying 6 or more wins. Like, there's no way we don't get 6 wins. But, heck, we know this last year could tell us no better. Arizona State was ranked, preseason 13th, and they won the whole thing. And, went to college football playoffs. Whereas there was no way I thought that was happening. But this year, is there a chance Oklahoma State could – what do you think would be the craziest – highest bar Oklahoma State could hit this year with this football team? Is it just absurd to think they could have an Arizona State deal where a freshman comes in and has a Sam Levitt type season, or is there a possibility where, hey, you know what, the Oregon game's the loss, and that kind of starts somewhat of a, hey, we can see the cracks in the walls, and maybe some stuff's coming down a little bit more here, because the non-conference games are 2 easy ones, of course, at home, and then one that's not easy whatsoever.
Yeah, I think their non-conference schedule works out well, right? I mean, they have UT Martin at home, should be a win. They go to Oregon, which I think is going to be a loss, I think. And but how bad it is and what they can learn from that loss. I think you can lose by a touchdown and learn nothing about your team, or you can get blown out and learn a lot of things about your team. And so what they take away from that game and then use it next week against Tulsa, to another team that again you should win before the games really start mattering. It's going to be crucial for them. And so I think this is a team that, on paper and just kind of looking around the rest of the conference and, talking, I talked with other, Big 12 sites and Big 12 writers, in the 24/7 network. And, they can go from 6-6. They can go, 10-2, 9-3 is a possibility, I'd imagine. I mean, I think in the Vegas odds, I think the 9 wins is the highest win rate for a Big 12 team. I mean, it's just such a crapshoot. I mean, there's so much turnover, especially in this conference. I know there's turnover across the country, in every conference, but this conference, the preseason champion has yet to win. So in the last 4 or 5 years, so I think Texas was the first to do it in a while, back when they won 23. But yeah, I mean, last year I picked them to go 11-1. And make college football playoff, and they didn't. So so I mean, I think it's just such a crapshoot until we see it in action. But there's definitely they've got let's look at it. They've got Baylor at home, K-State at home, Iowa State at home. I think Arizona could be an interesting game on the road. Kansas, is the year that Jalen Daniels actually shows what he can do. Texas Tech is always an interesting thing. And then the last time they went to Orlando, another forgettable game. Back in 2023 when just everything went wrong against the Knights down there for their space game. It's not their space game this year, they've announced. So that's already one win for Oklahoma State. But yeah, I mean, I think they've got a favorable schedule. It's just, what this team looks like week to week and against opponent to opponent is going to be huge. And this is definitely a year. I think this is one of the most important years for, Mike Gundy and given another chance and kind of a, go show me that. And I don't know if the expectations to go show me and get to the college football playoff this year, but I think just showing that they're on the right path, that, Grantham and Meacham are doing the right things. And so having another year under their belt, they can get to that next step in 2026 and just going on the right path. Because last year, I mean, they were clearly on the wrong path. They really should have gone 2-10 after that Arkansas game went just crazy and a wild second half comeback and everything. But yeah, I mean, to go from that to being on the right path will be huge for the Cowboys this year.
The quarterback room seems murky at best on trying to see through the mud here and how everything's going. The most recent mailbag you wrote answering some fans' questions was, hey, Zane Flores got medical hardship waiver where he's got another year of eligibility here. Is there any rhyme or reason why that is relevant news now, or is that just kind of like notable, or is there also maybe that hints he could be starting, or it's between him and Haas? And I mean, we know we got the Tulsa transfer on the roster too, who's related to an Oklahoma State guy, but it's kind of, he was a 3-star and Haas was originally a 3-star and Zane was a 3-star. So it's just kind of, it's interesting if he's not in the conversation whatsoever, because he was a same kind of recruit maybe, but also I could be not reading it right here.
Yeah, I think it is a 2-man race, just because you have had a full spring with Dane and Haas and Banks Bowen, the son of Clint Bowen, a offensive analyst this year for OSU. So I think it's between Dane and Haas, and again, we were able to see media members were able to see about an hour and a half combined practices, and then we saw the spring game. And each day, if somebody, we in the press would be like, who's QB1, and I think every day the answer changed depending on what we saw. So, I think right now I would lean Zane just because of the seniority. He's been around the program more, but how much does that matter if the offensive coordinator, the quarterbacks coach are all new? So it's a blank slate for them. So just based off of knowing Mike Gundy, and he enjoys the seniority, he enjoys giving guys that have been around the program a fair shot. But I truly believe those first 3 games will be similar to what we saw in 23 between a 2-man rotation, where you just give guys different looks, give them, I think, more balance. I mean, I don't know what that will look like against 3 very different opponents, especially that Oregon game on the road. But I think they're not gonna have to make a decision until September 20th, the week before Baylor. I think is when they'll really nail down who is the starting quarterback going into conference play between Haas and Zane this fall.
Well, we've seen the quarterback non-permanent selector, I guess, work out for us and go into a Big 12 championship game, but also we've seen it be a pretty darn bad loss to University of South Alabama at home. So we'll see which side of the tide here shows up. Other couple questions I want to ask you, though, is that you wrote about our basically our depth here at some of the special I say special teams, but basically our depth here at kind of the offensive weapons depth here that Oklahoma State has. Of course, we have a former guy who's thrown a touchdown pass on the roster, but he's the wide receiver, Sam Jackson V. If you didn't know that fun trivia fact from 7 other times I mentioned on the podcast, there you go. But former TCU guy, transfers to Auburn, then transfers to Oklahoma State. Of course, wide receiver now. He's the guy watching the spring game to me that kind of like lit it up, was kind of a highlight guy. He ran a playback for a touchdown. Now, I say a play because if I really said a kickoff, it might hold more gravitas than really it was the spring game, because we saw some quarterbacks take 37-yard sacks or whatever it be because there was a guy whose hand was in the area. So spring game, what it is. What do you think about the offensive weapon room right now for Oklahoma State?
I think it's deep. I think at all 3 positions. Running back, they've got Trent Howland came back. Rodney Fields looked pretty good last year as a true freshman. Freddie Brock, a guy that we weren't able to see this spring. He's a transfer from Georgia State who comes in with a lot of experience, rushed for more than 800 yards last year. And Sissy Valadi, who looked pretty good as a true freshman in 2023, took a step back, I think, a little bit last year. Just playing other guys. Maybe that was offensive line, maybe that was the offense as a whole. But I think that there's 3 or 4 different running backs. I'm curious this year. Gundy has said that he wants one guy to take 25 reps. I'm curious who that is. I lean towards Howland. I think he's got the experience. I think he is just a better true runner. But then Rodney Fields, when he was a senior down in Del City, I went to a game and I was planning to stay the entire game and then talk to him after. And then he only played the first half because he had 3 touches for like 200 something yards. I mean, he just took the handoff and went. So he's got that speed. He's got that agility. I think those 2 guys are a really good 1-2 punch. And then you had the other guys. And then receiver, I mean, a lot of guys that Oklahoma State fans, Oklahoma State media haven't seen a ton. But again, there's a lot of veteran ability. There's a lot of variant. You got the small guys, the Shamar Rigby's, the Jalen Lloyd's are kind of smaller, very quick slot positions. And then you've got guys like, Christian Fitzpatrick, Shaddamai King coming back from last year. These are bigger guys that you throw it up and expect them to catch the ball. So they got some variance there. And then they've added a lot of tight ends behind Josh Ford. I still think Josh Ford is the best tight end option. But just having other guys that you can do different things, have two tight end sets. They're all pass catchers. They're all offensive threats. So I think there's a lot of versatility. I think there's a lot of depth and a lot of speed, especially in that receivers room. Like it says, Sam Jackson, wasn't on my 2 deep at receiver, but I think he's the guy that's gonna replace Vernon Presley as the punt returner, as a kick returner this season. And I think it's funny, in 20 years when if you go to Oklahoma State trivia and they ask who's the only player on Oklahoma State's spring roster that's thrown a touchdown in a game, it would be Sam Jackson V against Oklahoma State. So very cool, very exciting. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of depth. Again, we haven't seen them play together. We haven't seen them wearing orange and black much. But I think there's definitely guys that, again, on paper and on film, fit to what Doug Meacham wants to do this season. Again, guys that are new to this team.
Yeah, well, it's a lot of trying to see through the mud from Gundy from over the years of him not. I wouldn't say he's Belichick-esque in the fact that he doesn't talk to the media, doesn't give any answers. He definitely gives long-winded answers, that's for sure, as we know. But he definitely gives quirky answers too. He's maybe telling us a little bit more than we want to know about certain things, but we're not asking about it. The main thing I'm always going is like, what's the offense going to look like? What's the defense going to look like when we have two new coordinators? I mean, we have a TCU guy, and of course, as you spoke in Grantham's, previous experience with the SEC, and then with the Saints coming over. What do you anticipate the offense kind of looking like, and kind of the defense looking like this season, or is there any way to even look at it? Because you brought up multiple tight ends, could run with 2 tight ends set, multiple tight ends transferring in from other schools that are kind of big name guys. When I agree, I mean, from what I know, Josh Ford is the guy. He started as a freshman and he came back. Why wouldn't he still be the guy? So, what do you kind of think the offense and the defense look like this year? Do you think they're a little bit similar to any previous Oklahoma State teams at all?
Yeah, I think you think back to those, 2010, 2012, 2011, Justin Blackman, Brandon Whedon. I don't know if Haas Haiti or Shamar Rigby is going to live up to that connection or anything, but they're definitely going to be an air raid, very fast offense, which is why I think they brought in a lot of depth on offense in all the entire every position except for quarterback. They brought in a lot of guys that they can rotate in. The guys rest, especially, tight end, Josh Ford can't go replay if they're trying to go fast. I think that's something that they're, looking similar at. I think they got to throw the ball a lot. It's something the quarterback, first day of spring camp, we talked to all 4 quarterbacks and they all were just like super excited to have the opportunity to throw it out, air it out, both, just, quick string stuff, but also, 30, 40 yard passes down the field. So, that's something that I fully expect. And then on defense, I think they're going to have a lot of, 3 down fronts with a strong edge rushing presence. Using those outside linebackers, using those, edge guys to really, Gundy's thing since I've been here, and I'm sure it's been this way before then, was to get the quarterback. That's how you win on defense, put pressure on the quarterback. And obviously he's an offensive-minded guy that still just very offensive-minded, but I think that's something that's been so paramount to him. If you can get guys, if you can get the quarterback, whether you sack him or just make him uncomfortable, it's going to lead to good things for your defense. And that's something that Grantham has really put a lot of emphasis on. The guys he's gotten have been speed guys. They've been doing a lot of them. And they've, like I said earlier, they're able to rotate guys, get guys rest. So they're not thinking about every single play, but just, making life hell for the opposing quarterbacks. So that leads to a bad throw, leads to a sack, leads to a, fumble, whatever it may be. Just making life hell for that opposing quarterback. It's been that, it seems like Grantham's really going to want to do this season.
Well, that all sounds pretty awesome comparatively, because like you said, the optimism's got to be here with football because it can't get much worse than last year. And I do have to agree. Last year came in with a bunch of expectations. This year, there's not really much in my opinion, except for hopefully a bowl game. Hopefully that's doable. On the other big sport here, of course, during this, waiting on baseball. By the time this podcast comes out, we'll know what happens with baseball, where the regionals announced everything. But I do want to ask about basketball in the meantime here. Steve Lutz and company they're out there on the recruiting trail, still trying to get guys. Most recently was this Greek forward who's going to be coming in as a freshman at 22 years old. There's no way I'm going to try to pronounce his name completely here first try, but he's from Greece. You wrote a great article about him. I'll have links below in the description here, but his nickname's Lefty, and I'm left-handed, so that's why I'm bringing him up here. Lutz's quote here that you had is that he's a proven competitor with championship experience at highest levels of European basketball. He's got a great, deep understanding of the game, and his size and elite shooting ability fit well with our offense, and we're excited to welcome to Stillwater. What more can you tell us about how Oklahoma State's doing this offseason basketball-wise, recruiting kind of guys and transfers in? Because there weren't that many guys staying on the roster because there were a bunch of seniors, honestly, too.
Yeah, I think they had 2 guys return, Robert Jennings and Andre. Of his last name, Andre.
Yeah, I think he left for a minute and then came back. If I remember,
there were some reports that he had gone back to Serbia, but I never heard of it. But so, yeah, replacing the whole roster was paramount. They, similar to football, they went out and got guys that they wanted. And I think having a full offseason to do that, last year got hired much later in the transfer portal process than he would have liked to, obviously. And so the roster that they ended up with for 2024, 2025 was not what he would have wanted. So having a full offseason to scout, having, being able to connect, make connections, use, get guys on campus and get guys that he wanted. I'm sure they lost out on a couple guys that, opted to go elsewhere. I know they did. But these are all guys that they're really excited about. They've got a couple of shooters. They got a couple of big guys. Lefty is one of them. Power forward there. But yeah, they just want the guys that are going to play their style of basketball, which is very up tempo, very, defensive minded offense and schematics and schemes. So, this is a guy that fits their bill. He's a veteran. He's, 22 years old. He's going to be a true freshman. The irony is he is right-handed. So just a little fun, tidbit there for Lutz in the gang. So, I think they got a pretty good roster right now. Again, you're playing in the toughest conference in the country, the Big 12, where, I think now it's such a veteran heavy conference. You think about Houston, just having these guys that they come in as freshmen, they don't play, and then by the time they're juniors, seniors, they're the Final Four. So I think this conference is continually getting tougher and tougher with their additions and with just everybody else. Kansas is not the best team in the conference anymore, and so. Lutz understands that. His coaching staff understands that. Players understand that. And I think that's a huge opportunity in the recruiting process is you're going to come play in the toughest conference against the best competition. You're going to play at Baylor twice. You're going to play Baylor twice a year. You're going to play Kansas twice a year, Texas Tech, Houston, all these, perennial powers. You're playing them at least once a year. So that's been a huge benefit for this roster that feels like they can match that level. I think this is a year where, last season was the first season for Steve Lutz to miss the tournament. And I think that will be the last season. I think this is a team that is I think it's a team that's going to make the tournament this year, just based off of, Lutz and what he's going to do with them. He's going to get them in Stillwater in a couple of weeks and really just start the timer of, getting them reps and, building a schedule and getting them ready for, a big 2025-26 season.
Well, what are some of the reasons that you think that this team is going to be that much better? Is some of the recruits? Is Lutz get them in the door earlier? Or is it a combination? Just also Lutz just being just a great head coach. He's had success everywhere he's gone. He's been at Purdue and shook some hands there, but been there for a minute. Of course, he was the main fun fact everyone has is he's the guy who recruited Zach Edey and got him there and stuff. And of course, Edey's now in the pros, but had an amazing career. But what are some of the reasons why you think that Lutz is like the guy for Oklahoma State to get him back to the tournament and hopefully farther than that?
I think he's had a full offseason. I think last year definitely handicapped him. He got hired in April, and by that time, a lot of the I don't think they got I think they finished with like a top 30 transfer portal class for 24/7. So they got a couple top 100 transfers. But as far as versus last year, where he was kind of sifting through the leftovers without a staff when he started. So having a full off season to get guys on campus, get the guys he wanted on campus, and then get them here, start the workout program, start, both workout on the court and, in the weight room and everything. And so having a full off season to go through that, is something that he's going to really benefit from. And then he's a guy that, every time we talk with him after games or during the week, he understands why they lost the game before. He understands what they need to do to win the next game. And so I think he's a guy that just lives and breathes basketball. And so I think he's a great fit for this program and where they want to be and where they have been before. I mean, about 20 years ago this year that they went to the Final Four. So it's been proven that they can have success in this tough conference. But as we all know, it's been a couple years since they've consistently done that. So I think Lutz is up to the challenge and is capable to get them back to where they need to be.
Well, I would love to see a packed Gallagher again. 13,000 plus fans just going nuts in there because the last season at the end of it, it was so much fun watching those NIT games and being there for those. And that was with a very small crowd comparatively to how it should be, but how it was against Kansas and OU when I was a student. Briefly here, just kind of wrapping up, I wanted to ask you about softball and baseball. By the time you're listening to this, like I said, it'll be announced for Oklahoma State's playing in the in the regionals here for baseball. Knock on wood, were announced, of course, one of those teams. But want to ask you kind of about basically Josh Holiday and Rob Walton retiring here at the end of the season. Do you think baseball makes any other changes during the offseason here? Or, and the rumors of Josh Holiday should leave or do something different seem crazy to me for all of the success he's had. But is there anything else more you want to touch on the subject there?
Yeah, I think you got to see what happens in the postseason. I think obviously you're gonna have, replace a pitching coach. I don't know if Holiday would want to replace multiple coaches. I mean, finding a pitching coach to come to a Power 4 school and at this level is going to be challenging in itself. You want to add, hitting coach as well. I think Holiday stays this offseason. I know he's been linked to, Mississippi State's opening or a couple openings around, but I mean, if they make a regional and win a regional, I think everything looks really good. If they miss the postseason, then I think you have different conversations. So I think you used to have, similar to football, it was just a fluke year. I know obviously they've hosted regionals the last 3 years and failed to advance out of them, but I think you kind of wait to have those conversations after this week, to see what happens. And then softball, I think it was just they didn't hit on a lot of their transfers. I mean, obviously Ruben Malin was phenomenal, all Big 12 pitcher, who struggled, bluntly there in Fayetteville. And I think she's very intense. She put a lot of pressure on herself, and the defense behind her, I don't know, lived up to what she was needing and what OSU was needing, as we've seen in past years. So I think it's going to be very crucial for Kenny and the staff to go out and really fill those holes with, transfers that are up to the task and know how they struggled this year and build upon that. And for the girls that are coming back, just learning from losing again in the first round of the Big 12 tournament, and then they gave up a comeback win against Arkansas to lose out of the regional for the first time in 5 years. So I think I trust Kenny to get it back on track for next year again, because similarly to football, Big 12 is very wide open. It feels like, I know, and Texas Tech is spending a lot of money. They went out and got Kennedy, and now they're in the World Series. But I think for the rest of it, and for most of it, it's very wide open, and it should be an opportunity to continuously, get to super regionals. And I think getting to the World Series is a goal, and I know it's a goal for Kenny and the staff. And I think that's something that's definitely attainable, moving forward, making the right offseason moves.
Yeah, I can't wait until Kate Cunningham or some other former Oklahoma State guys decide they want to donate money back to NIL programs like Patrick Mahomes did with Texas Tech. I mean, there's got to be a partnership there. Cade's big contract hasn't came to the NBA yet. He's the guy. Maybe there's some other guys as well out there, Brandon Whedons of the world and others who are just sitting around going, yeah, what can we do here to get this a little bit different? Because the one transfer in softball, I mean, it was how much media attention Texas Tech's getting, times there was the clips back and forth of her having a great inning and Patrick Mahomes being shown. Just so much, I think, for the school publicity-wise, that there's got to be plenty of schools looking at it and going, what can we do to get on that kind of level? Of course, it's not like we have a Super Bowl winning quarterback on the Oklahoma State side of it yet, but, fingers crossed, Zane, Haas, maybe Mason Rudolph this year. Who knows what happens there in Pittsburgh? All works out.
Yeah, I mean, once Kate Cunningham's All-NBA bonus kicks in, he'll call up Chad and get things sorted out for the basketball program. But yeah, I mean, as we talk, just kind of circling back to the beginning about the passion and the pride that they have for all these programs. I mean, we just talked about 4 today. We didn't even hit on wrestling. We didn't hit on golf either. I mean, there's so much talent and so much success for Oklahoma State athletics as a whole. They had a national champion runner this year. So, I mean, there's a lot going on. And if this is the worst year that Oklahoma State athletics has seen in a long time, it's still a very good year.
Yeah, and then I always try to kind of bring back the fact I've got friends who went to Oklahoma State who are from, weirdly, one of my best friends is from the Atlanta area, and he came to Oklahoma State for the sports media program, and he's now a teacher, but his main thing, of course, with Oklahoma State is like, hey, I just don't think they have the money. And I'm going, I think the fan passion and the hype is there, and I think the money in some aspects is there. Because Gundy's always been a top 50, top 25, some years a top 10 head coach. This year, I think he's top 25. Like, we're not paying all of our coaches I guess they're staying on because they're a a guy doesn't want to leave, or okay, they're comfortable here. That's, and we're re-recruiting him to stay. It's like, no, Gundy's making above making 6.8 million. I mean, he's getting paid a pretty darn decent salary for a competitive job in the Big 12. So I always think the money's there, and financially it can happen with anything can happen in Oklahoma State. There could be a year where everything goes to crap. It's like, oh, woe was me. But then all of a sudden wrestling does incredible. Wyatt Hendrickson has the incredible. He's making every single, ESPN hit and Pat McAfee show and all type of stuff too. So there's so many good things happening with the Oklahoma State program every single year. And it sounds like basketball's got to be on the rise here with so many different guys coming in, 11 new guys here. And heck, football's got to be different. No matter what, it's not going to be the same as last year. That's what we know for sure, right? So, McClain, thanks so much for joining here. If you're not already, please follow at McClain Baxley on Twitter/X. Are you on Threads, Blue Sky? Have you jumped over to those yet?
I'm on all three, yeah.
All right.
I'm not like on them, but yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm McClain Baxley on all of theirs as well. So.
Well, nice. I know Twitter was down earlier this past week. So, if you're trying to make sure to follow you everywhere, go to gopokes.com. That's the best way, easiest way. We'll link all your recent articles here down below in the description. Really appreciate you joining latest episode of the CGA Tour podcast. If you're not already, please follow and subscribe at CGA Tour on Twitter, X, Threads, and of course, YouTube here. Blaine, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll catch you guys again soon. And as always, go Pokes.